Hi, everybody. This is Sharon Meyer speaking, and I'm the integrative nutritionist at the Institute for Health and Healing. So we're going to talk about getting or gut bacteria and how it impacts and what the connection is with the immune system. So what do we know about gut bacteria? We know that there are about 100 trillion microbes that live in or on your body. And 70% of those microbes are in the colon. And that in the colon, or the collection of that, is called the microbiota. And it's composed of many things. It's composed of bacteria and archaea and viruses and yeast. And there are something like 400 to 1,500 different species. There are actually 35,000 that are known species, but in our body, we seem to have only about 400 to 1,500, and we would prefer people to have more than less. Now, of these gut bacteria, 90 to 95% are composed of the Bacteroides and the Firmicutes. These are particular families. And then there are a bunch of other families too, but the Bacteroides and the Firmicutes make up the bulk of those. Now the reason, so what do these gut bacteria do? What do the gut bugs do? Well, they're very much involved in the following. They're involved in how we digest and absorb our foods and our nutrients. They protect us against pathogenic bacteria, viruses, and parasites. They regulate our metabolism, and they're involved in detoxification. We kind of call the gut bacteria our second liver. They're very much involved in how we regulate our immune system, and they're involved with how we make and release enzymes. They're involved with vitamins B and K, neurotransmitters, stress, inflammation. Inflammation is part of our immune system. They're involved in how we sleep, how we regulate hormones. They promote activity in the gut. This is where we have a lot of our immune system, our gut immunity. They're involved in the production of short-chain fatty acids, and I'll talk a little bit more about that as we go on. They're involved in how we digest lactose. Of course, constipation and bowel movements are impacted by our gut bacteria. They're also involved with our brain function and how we make antibodies, which of course is definitely a topic right now. So they do so many different things, and there is research daily in what gut bacteria do and how they impact our bodies. So if you think about your bacteria, and if your bacteria was lined up end to end, they would stretch all the way to the moon. That's how many there are. It's mind-boggling, don't you think? And 60 to 70% of our immune system is located in our gut. So very important right now, don't you think? The interconnectedness of gut, brain, immune, and our hormonal systems is so intertwined, it's impossible to unwind those different systems. We have the gut-skin axis, we have the gut-brain axis, we have the gut-heart axis. All of this is part of who we are and how we function. The individuality of our gut bacteria is also important. So when you're coming down the birthing canal, you start to interact with the environment and the air, and therefore bacteria, and then they start to interact with your genes. So you have this hive of bacteria that is entirely yours. The interesting thing is that when you are in a relationship, there is a binding of some of those bacteria, a commingling of those, even with some of your pets. Fascinating stuff. Stress plays a huge role in the function of our bacteria. So, for example, cortisol, which is the long-term stress hormone, can change your microbiota. And then this can promote inflammation. Inflammation in itself can promote a leaky gut. Again, an immune response after that. Then more cortisol gets secreted, higher inflammation, and then we see an increased dysbiosis. And dysbiosis means the imbalance of gut bacteria. Also, we make 90% of serotonin in the gut. So when we get to be stressed, we'll use up that serotonin instead of using that for the gut's function. So the whole thing with dysbiosis is, again, this is the out of balance or imbalance of of gut bacteria, it can lead to many different things in the body, like a leaky gut. We'll get into a bit of detail around that. Pro-inflammation, weight gain, diabetes, heart disease, you name it, there's a list of risk factors that occur when we have this imbalance of our gut bacteria. So, of course, what causes that? Nutrient deficiencies. Dehydration plays a huge role in the dysbiosis of gut bacteria. The glutens, all of the prolamines and the agglutins, these are the things that the plants use to protect themselves from the environment. They can be a link with dysbiosis. Alcohol, too much of that. Non-nutritive sweeteners, too much sugar, too many of the refined starches and carbohydrates really play a role in impacting or promoting dysbiosis. Pesticides and glyphosates and polluted waters and medications, all of these can cause an imbalance with our gut bacteria. And then that promotes that whole thing around the leaky gut. So what is the leaky gut? Well, the leaky gut is these particularly tight junctions which control what passes through the lining of the intestines. And these can become damaged, or there could be some inflammation around that. The damage means is that certain things can leak into the bloodstream that normally would not be allowed in. And then we have an immune reaction, and then there's a cascade of events that happen after that. So causes of leaky gut can be sort of the food sensitivities, too much sugar, too much alcohol, too many carbohydrates, medications, chemicals, all of that. Very similar to that of dysbiosis. So when we think about the microbiome, we think, well, what are the things that are going to impact it beneficially? So here's it. Diet. 60% of the diet will determine the composition of the microbiome, which means is that we have so much power in how we can change our gut bacteria. Lifestyle is only 40%. So diet is 60 and lifestyle is 40. And when we talk about lifestyle, we talk about aging, hormones, genes, toxin exposure, environment, exercise, sedentary, all of that. But the diet plays a major role, which is fascinating because that's very empowering. So where would we start to make some differences? Certainly when we start to look at things like vegetables and fruit, those phytochemicals and the diversity of the different types of fiber really impact the gut bacteria, because there are certain fibers that would feed certain strains of bacteria. Those phytonutrients too, excuse me, also will promote different strains of probiotics or gut bacteria. So those foods play such a huge role. So do the polyphenols and the antioxidants. All of that will feed and promote different strains and families of bacteria. So what's fascinating about the data is it shows that just by increasing your vegetable and fruit intake, you can restore levels of your bacteria in 3 to 4 days. Is that not phenomenal? Blows my mind. So the other thing that we look at is the fiber. And why is fiber so very important? Well, the gut bacteria ferment fiber into something called short-chain fatty acids. This is a molecule that's involved with helping us with energy sources for the gut bacteria and for immune cells. There are 3 particular short-chain fatty acids that are important. Butyric acid is probably the most important. But it's really good for the fuel for the intestinal cells, and it really helps to modulate the immune function, especially the Treg cells, which is pretty much what we want to do here. And it impacts, these short-chain fatty acids impact all functions of the body, from the colon's motility to weight gain to the heart to brain to diabetes. So we want the fiber because the gut bacteria ferment that fiber to produce the short-chain fatty acids. So we get the fiber from many different molecules, but certainly from vegetables. That's the function there. So when we talk about vegetables, or foods, what are the really important ones? So the cruciferous vegetables are really important because they've got all those phytochemicals that seem to impact very beneficially some of the better families of gut bacteria that we need. It's got the glucosinates in it, the indoles, the sulforates, all of those are those phytonutrients that we need. The alliums, so the alliums are going to be garlic and onions and leeks and chives. All of those have inulin in it, and inulin is that particular fiber or phytonutrient that the gut bacteria really hunger for. We need those. And quercetin also comes from those. Quercetin is one of those molecules that is very important for immunity. Apples are, when we talk about an apple a day keeps the doctor away, it's amazing, but it's quite true because apples have nutrients and specific fibers that really are important for making short-chain fatty acids. Berries, particularly the raspberries, are great for the gut, but so are mushrooms. So mushrooms also have different fibers in them. They have chitin and chitosan, and they have alpha and the beta-glucans. But the beta-glucans are extremely important for supporting immunity. That's where that whole thing with mushrooms and immune system comes into play. It's around the beta-glucans. Honey is a prebiotic. I've been saying for years that honey, there's something magical about honey and how it's made and how important it is for the body. Now we know that that honey is even recommended for type 2 diabetes, and it has a prebiotic function to this, and it's really good for the lactic acid bacteria. They seem to thrive on that. The polyphenols from both green and black tea are so important too. And then olive oil. So extra virgin olive oil is really important for the entire body, but it's got 30 different polyphenols or phytonutrients in them that we need to function. And they are extremely important for gut bacteria too. So be very liberal with your olive oil. In most cases, I will use olive oil as a finishing oil. So I'll use avocado oil if I need to cook anything on a very high heat. And then at the end of that, I'll add different olive oils because, depending on the olive will depend on the types of olives or olive oil. So taste plays a huge role in that. Don't be shy with the olive oil. So we also look at things like bone broth. Now, I've spoken about bone broth often, but bone broth is important because it reduces inflammation, it helps to heal a leaky gut, it's anti-inflammatory, it supports the immune system. So it's got these amino acids in it that are so functional. So glycine is anti-inflammatory, it's one of the amino acids. The glutamine and the arginine in that improves the diversity of the gut bacteria. And then glutamine is one of those amino acids too, but when we become deficient in glutamine, there's an increased likelihood of a leaky gut. So bone broth plays a great role, and right now using bone broth as a base for all your soups would be brilliant. And then adding lots of vegetables that are in your bone broth and making soup from that would be great. The best foods, of course, are going to be, in addition to those, would be prebiotic foods. So prebiotic foods help. They're the ones with certain fibers that help to make those short-chain fatty acids. And the best prebiotic foods are going to be artichokes and sweet potatoes, plantains, onions, garlics, and leeks, asparagus, bananas, taro, miso, jicama, and chicory. There are probiotic foods. Actually, the data now substantiates the prebiotic foods being far more important than actually probiotic foods. But I think it's a good idea to use both. So probiotic foods would be the fermented vegetables, so things like sauerkraut and kimchi and pickled veggies. Dairy, if you can tolerate dairy, sort of the yogurt, ricotta, cottage cheese, kefir. If you can't tolerate dairy, of course, all the other nut yogurts have certain amounts of probiotics put into them too. So the coconut yogurts and the water kefirs too. Kombucha, and I think kombucha is a little overkill. Everybody drinks too much of that. And then there are some supplements if you need to, but you probably should be, we should recommend the supplements for you. So if we look at the summary of the superfoods, the cruciferous, of course, the leafy greens, mushrooms, berries, protein like cold water fish, the olive oil, herbs and spices, root vegetables, beans and legumes, nuts and seeds, and let's not forget chocolate. Dark chocolate is really good for the gut bacteria. Bone broth, fermented foods, and the green or black teas. All of these are part of our diet mostly, but we want to just up the quantity, especially around those vegetables. So I have a really good soup recipe, a mushroom soup recipe that I got from Nom Nom Paleo. But if you're interested in this, please email me and I will send that to you. So thanks for joining me, and I look forward to hearing from you.